Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Also, thanks to Julia, Stephen, and Ashley for joining. I'm super excited to learn about open source program offices and how more companies can leverage OSPOs to be able to bring open source to their company. I pinned a tweet. So like I have a couple of pre-planned questions. But if y'all want to go ahead and ask questions, I'm open to that. You can request to speak, you can DM me. And I also pinned a tweet to this Twitter space, so you can click that tweet and reply to it, and I'll check for it and ask questions from there. We definitely don't have to like rely on the questions I already have, but I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. And y'all can start with just like your name and what you do, your pronouns, whatever else you want to share. Let me know if y'all want to go in a particular order. For now, I see Julia, Stephen, and Ashley just like side by side. So if y'all want to do that order, sounds cool.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Julia Ferraioli. My pronouns are she, her. I have been working in OSPOs for quite a while now, but I'm currently taking some time off, which is a challenge unto itself. And I'll pass it over to Stephen, I believe.
Hey everyone, my name is Stephen Augustus. My pronouns are he, him. I am the head of open source at Cisco. And yeah, this is actually, it's both my first Twitter space as well as running my first OSPO. So I'm excited to be here, excited to take some questions and learn from the crew too.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Wolf. I go by she, her pronouns. I lead the Open Source Program Office, or OSPO, at GitHub. Prior to joining GitHub, about a little under a year ago, I led the Open Source Program Office at Yahoo and Verizon. Building bridges between companies and open source is something I'm very passionate about. I feel fortunate to be in this space, help others to participate more effectively in open source, and hope we can all be helpful to all of you today.
Awesome, love that. Also, Julia, I feel you on the taking time off and it being hard. I've taken time off before, and then I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And also, Stephen, congrats on this being your first OSPO. I'd just like to start with a question. I usually start with this question on like, what was your introduction to open source? How did you get started? Before we like dive into the the actual like meat of the conversation. But yeah, tell us your introduction, how you got started into open source for anyone who's listening and just interested in diving into open source.
So my introduction to open source was quite some time ago, and in fact, it was while I was doing a summer research position at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. And I was doing machine learning research, and it was very new to building actual practical applications. Um, and we were proposing doing a new machine learning algorithm. So instead of having to do that from scratch, we actually found an open source library called Weka. Came out of New Zealand, and it didn't do quite what we wanted, but we were able to modify some existing implementations of algorithms, and that blew my mind. It was like, whoa, you can download code from SourceForge, run it on your computer, learn from it, make modifications to it, and I don't have to pay for it? That's wild. So I think from there on out, I was kind of sold on open source. The research project was a success, by the way, in case you're interested.
Love it.
That's so awesome. So for me, I actually, I was, I feel like I'm newer I think I've been doing open source for maybe 5, 6 years at this point. I started at CoreOS. So I was previously a customer of CoreOS, and then I became an employee, a year and change later. And we were delivering Tectonic, which was a Kubernetes distribution at the time, but also Quay and Core Update. So a lot of the things that have become like components of like the operator framework and various components of like container registries are things that myself or teams around me have worked on. So the big project that I had was a customer called Starbucks. And they were implementing or they were interested in Tectonic on Azure, which required me. So Tectonic on Azure was kind of like pre-alpha, alpha at the time, and that required me to kind of get involved in the Terraform community to build out some functionality in the Terraform providers for Azure, but also kind of moving further upstream into Kubernetes and hanging out there to learn from that crew. So that's kind of where I got started, and then I got hooked on Kubernetes and have been working there ever since.
Let me drop in the heart emoji there. Huge fan of all the work you do on Kubernetes. I think that my introduction to open source might be a little like non-traditional in the sense that I actually came more from the framing of an OSPO. I was always passionate about developers and community, and I didn't know how to put the two of those together in a job. And I coded a little bit, so I was vaguely aware of open source, but it wasn't till I was figuring out what to do after college for work and thinking, oh, I'm really into intellectual property. I was a huge fan of a lot of these nonprofit digital rights groups, and I thought, oh, maybe I could go pursue a career in law around intellectual property. And then I was doing a ton of research online in this space, and I found people like Gil Yehuda and Heather Meeker who were talking about companies that built programs and process so that they could release intellectual property and publish source code. Like companies were giving code away for free, and my mind was like blown, like that this was a program or a team at companies that they were working to help people to be able to build community around code and be good corporate citizens. And I was drawn to this. I thought like that's pretty much like it for me. It would be the perfect mix of all the things that I'm interested in. So shortly after that, I joined Yahoo as a product manager, and I was then able to transfer and work in the open source and standards team and really dive into that world. And I guess the rest is history as of now.
Love it. Thanks for sharing, y'all. I'm always interested in people's journey into open source just because mine is definitely new. I like only discovered it like 8 months ago. So I'm always like open to hearing about like traditional or non-traditional entrances into open source. Okay, so now I'm curious for people that are listening in, and I guess not everyone has to answer this because it's a pretty straightforward response, I guess, but if you all want to answer, like if everyone wants to go ahead, I'm curious, like what is an OSPO and like why would a company even need one? And yeah, anyone can answer.
I can kick us off. I think I like to take the spicy take approach where if you're using any software, if you're building, writing code, doing anything like that, you need an open source program office. Whether you're a startup or a large company, if you have anything to do with software, you're likely using open source. And so you should care about what comes along with that, the risks that you're taking, the opportunity to contribute back to projects and be a part of a community. Even when it comes to startups, often it's like, well, startups, they may be really small, they might not have the resources to create an open source program office there. The thing is, you may want to get acquired or you may want to do acquisitions. And as part of M&A, there's a focus on open source. And so if you could be organized and coordinated around the open source that you use or you create, you're going to be ahead of the game there because you're going to have to do it anyways. So my spicy take is like small or large companies, startups or not, if you work with software, you should have an OSPO.
Okay, now that Ashley's opened up the spicy takes, I will lend mine. I would say that if you are a large company, software or using software, then you should have an open source programs office. However, if you are a smaller company and maybe open source, you're not releasing open source, all you're doing is consuming it, and you don't have the resources to dedicate staff to staff an open source programs office, you might want to consider instead establishing a community, an open source community of practice within your company, of people who understand open source or are willing to learn, and have them function as your mini OSPO to take care of any compliance issues. Like Ashley mentioned, the possibility of getting acquired or acquiring. It is good to have some awareness of the risks and benefits of open source, and including or distributing open source in your software from the beginning. And actually, the earlier that you have this community of practice, whether you call it an OSPO or not, the better shape you'll be in down the road. And I speak from experience on that.
Yeah, I mean, ditto to what Julia and Ashley said. I think that, why an OSPO? I think it depends. There are lots of different shapes of OSPO, and it will, it may depend on where it lands within your organization. I definitely agree that the larger you get, the higher the need for it. At Cisco, the plan that's in my head is, we're definitely going to have this kernel of an OSPO, but I think, it works really well, to Julia's point, to kind of have this distributed OSPO, this idea of a distributed OSPO or a community of practice where you don't necessarily have to pull, you have an orbit, but you don't necessarily have to pull every single person into some organizational structure that is specific to open source. I think that we've seen OSPOs that are housed in engineering and marketing and legal and compliance, and all of those OSPOs have different shapes and requirements. So I think before you even consider do I need an OSPO, right? So the question was like, do we need what's an OSPO, and do I need one? You should ask yourself, and I think in engineering in general, you should ask yourself the question, what problem am I trying to solve, right? If you can answer that, then that gets you in a better position to decide what the shape of your OSPO should be.
Love that. Lots of gems dropped. I feel like y'all said whether you're a small startup or a large company, you should start thinking about having an OSPO at least, or at the very least start like implementing those practices, and then before you figure out if you need one, you should be thinking like, what problems am I trying to solve? I know someone requested to speak, so curious if they have a question. I'm adding them right now. It says connecting. Sarab. I hope I'm saying your name right. Sarabcher. What's your question?
Yeah, so
Yeah, I see you.
I have one question actually. So when we have used open source programs in our product basically, so it comes with its own challenges basically, because every now and then the compliance requirements are there, and at times if the project is not actively supported, by a good community, then we run into the risk. So how one should avoid that kind of thing, or what should be the mitigation plan or migration plan in that case?
So I think the answer to any good, reasonably complex problem is it depends. I view contributing to open source in a few different lenses, and these are maybe oversimplified, but the kind of the hat of the contributor, the hat of the maintainer, and the hat of the sponsor, right? So as you become a larger company or a larger OSPO, I think it becomes easier to write checks. Writing checks is simple, and that is merely one of the many components of supporting open source, right? But I think outside of the sponsorship, there's the contribution aspect, there's the maintainership aspect. If I'm consuming, am I contributing back, and how am I doing that, right? Maybe it is the check, but maybe it becomes contribution, direct contribution, README fixes, README fixes, changes to base images, bug fixes, adding tests. What is the contributor ladder? How do I become? I'm always interested, if I'm looking at a project, if it's something that I'm sufficiently interested in, like, how do I become a maintainer of it? Right? How do I help this community long term? I don't think it's enough to consume, and I think that for anyone consuming projects, you do have to consider, if I care about the sustainability of this project, how am I going to help impact it?
I think there's also an element here of, in the question, if you're consuming open source, how do you evaluate whether it's the right project to choose if you've got multiple options, and what signals can you look for? And I think Stephen touched on a bunch of them. Like, is there good documentation? Are issues that are being filed responded to in a reasonable time frame? Does the project have hundreds or even just tens of outstanding pull requests that have gone unaddressed for longer than you would expect? And I think at the evaluation stage, looking at those things are critical, and providing some guidance through an open source programs office or however your company kind of structures it, providing those questions, those prompts, with the understanding that yes, it all depends, is a good thing to have from whoever the official expert on open source is from your company, and that can kind of help with the complexities of choosing. But there's also the importance of communicating the risk. If you use an open source project and for some reason it was the right project at the time, but it has turned into one that is no longer supported, they have no interest in getting help, you can of course fork it to make the updates that you want and take that responsibility on. But built into using open source is potentially having to swap it out for a different project. And that's just part of the risk and responsibility of using open source.
Julia and Stephen totally nailed it. I love it. I just want to add in that one thing we're hearing a lot of conversation around in the metrics space for open source is around project sustainability and viability, particularly how organizations can use a decision-making framework around some of the metrics that Stephen and Julia brought up as signals that there's something happening in this project we rely on. Should we be evaluating alternatives, or when should we be evaluating alternatives? So I do want to throw out there that there is a working group called Chaos. It's a project under the Linux Foundation. They're focused on open source and metrics, and recently this topic has come up there. So it might be a great forum to check out to learn more from the community on.
Yeah, Ashley.
Go for it, Julia.
Oh, I was just going to mention, kind of in the free area of things, there is a great product called cauldron.io, and you can actually plug in an open source project and analyze it for some of the important metrics. So highly check that out. You don't have to pay if you're just creating reports.
So yeah, so I'll also mention that so Chaos is a great resource that's focused on open source metrics. Very specifically on the sustainability side, there's a working group called Working Group Risk. There's also another effort. Is it ToDo group folks, Ashley and Julia, or is it specifically Dwayne, the funding OSS?
Dwayne created a working group for talking about FOSS funds in organizations, and it's also general conversation in ToDo group.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry, Julia, didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, I actually don't know.
So if folks are interested in their organizations creating programs to fund and sponsor open source, Dwayne O'Brien, who is the head of the OSPO for Indeed, created a working group. It's open, so feel free to reach out to him on Twitter if you're interested in joining that. It's a great way to learn from peers on creating funds in companies to support open source.
And I think maybe what we can do for the end of the space or something, maybe provide a link dump of some of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to find all the things y'all are talking about and add them to the Twitter thread, and then pin them at the top of the Twitter space. But if y'all have time, either add it to the thread as you speak or whatever, or after the Twitter space is over. But love that idea.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for that great question, Saurabh. I think that was a really good question and brought up lots of good conversation. What about you, Runtime Guy? I know you requested to speak. What's up?
Yeah, all good. So I have one doubt. So basically, let's say if some company has to choose some open source project or a product to use in the company, so how will you how open source project will grow with the security kind of thing? Because a company wants a security. So how open source project can handle the security part? Because the code is open source, right? So anybody can see the code, right? So hackers can also see the code, and they know the pain points, like how they can approach the code, how they can add any injection to that. So how projects can handle that, the open source thing. Yeah.
So that is an awesome question, and I think that again the answer to any sufficiently difficult question is it depends. So everyone's threat model is going to be different, and I think that at a baseline, as part of bringing things into your dependency chain, you have to understand what they're doing, right? There's to some of the previous discussion, assessing. You have to assess the risk of. You also have to assess the risk of would it be better for me to do this myself, for a team to do this themselves, or for us to ingest some open source project, right? Having things in the open is actually really good, as long as they're not, say, secrets, right? because there's a higher level of scrutiny just by it being out in the open, right? It's not just folks, in your internal audit departments or security or compliance taking a look at this. It's potentially anyone on the internet, right? So given a sufficiently sustained project, and responsible maintainers, they're gonna feel duty bound to make sure that project is free of vulnerabilities, right? So I'm, and if you also have a responsibility in consuming it to responsibly disclose things that you see that might be amiss. So in that case, I'm really betting on the open source project over the internal project.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that I believe that there have been some academic research papers that reflect what Stephen said, and I will try to find those after this space. But it was a really big concern, not even 5 or 6 years ago, from companies we can't use open source code because the hackers can see it and can bring down our products, and that has turned out to not be the case. So I will try to find those papers and link them.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So if anybody wants to idea, Ashley.
Oh, I was just gonna another shout out for a resource or groups that are talking about this space is the OSSF, the Open Source Security Foundation. They're heavily focused on helping communities to secure the open source that we all rely on. They actually released a project called a Criticality Score, and that helps to generate a formula around the influence and importance of the project. So you could use that and measure against if the project has any security vulnerabilities. If you're a company that's using a lot of open source and you want to be able to assess your risk level there and ensure that it meets your threshold, whatever you're okay with. But along with what Stephen and Julia said, there's risk associated with using open source. Establishing an open source program office or a group like that can help you to manage and reduce some of that risk by setting policy and strategy up for the company so that you can use open source safely.
So I'll also mention that the ingestion of a project, the consumption of it is, your implementation details are going to wildly vary from what's out there, right? The same defaults for an open source project or a hobby deployment on a laptop are going to be vastly different from what the production hardened version of it looks like, right? So kind of security is an onion. So as you're stepping through all of the various components, make sure that you're securing them, make sure that people, externally don't have access to things that they shouldn't. I think, you're kind of walking through a lot of the same steps when you decide to consume an open source project that you would if you were using an internal project. Now, for related to OpenSSF, I'm also a maintainer for scorecards and All-Star in the OpenSSF, and those are two projects that you can pick up. For All-Star has a kind of series of recipes or checks that you can enable. It's deployed as a public GitHub app, or you can deploy it yourself for your internal repos, and it'll walk through things like, do I have outside collaborators configured on my repos? Do I have binary artifacts checked in? Is branch protection configured, for example? So a few of those checks are in place, and then scorecard kind of as the name implies, can provide you a scorecard of various things that might be right or wrong with your repo, and this is something that you can run against your internal repos too. I think a lot of the checks are geared towards if you're living on GitHub. But you could also, run a few locally, and we're talking about support for GitLab as well. Now that the GitLab folks have joined in on OpenSSF, so lots of cool things to check out. If you were thinking about open source security at all, you should definitely be checking out the OpenSSF right now.
Yep, thanks guys for your great answer. Yeah. By the way, we are also running an open source organization, so we are also solving some of the problems which we face daily. So if anybody wants to check it out, so please go ahead. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. Over to
yeah. Who is we, by the way?
Sorry.
Is it Is it the Indian Open Source Software Foundation or something? Is that what it's called?
Right. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll find the link to your GitHub org, and I'll link it in the Twitter space. Thanks for asking that awesome question. Sorry, I just remembered that you were in the Twitter space last week or something like that, and you were talking about the Indian Open Source Software Foundation. Thank you so much for that awesome question, because I feel like a lot of times people are worried about security. So that was a really good question. My next question to y'all, and for anyone listening, feel free to jump in, feel free to request to speak, DM me, or reply to the pinned tweet that is at the top of this Twitter space if you have a question. But my question to y'all is, how would you go about bringing open source to your company? How would you go about talking to your boss and saying hey, I want to open source this project, or I think we should open source this project? How do you put that in a way that is persuasive and makes sense financially?
I'll start us off here. Oh, I hear an echo. Hopefully it's okay. I think that if you work at a company and you don't have a team you can go to, like an OSPO or a team that's advocating for putting open source out there, it may be challenging for you to figure out how to get this approval you need, or even where to go to get the approval you need. If you have an OSPO, great, or a team or a documented process, definitely go through those approved channels. If you're starting from just asking for permission, it would be similar to if you were interested in starting an OSPO, similar steps of building a case around the benefits for doing open source in a way that will benefit your organization. So some of the common benefits that we talk about for OSPOs and for doing open source in general is the contributions that you will receive to those projects will include people that go beyond your immediate team. You'll be able to source ideas and feedback and contributions from people all over the world by putting your code out there and building community around it. You'll be building relationships externally with communities, with teams, with projects, with other companies. You'll have more influence that way. That's very important to a lot of organizations. And by putting the work that you do, your tech stack, your code out there, you're actually able to publicly talk about the work that you do, which can help companies for hiring, for attracting talent. Open source is very hot right now for hiring developers, and it's a great way to have a view into what the tech stack they're using is and what the actual tools they're building are. So there's a lot of benefits for an organization to participate in open source. So if you can help to build the case around it for the project that you want to publish in a way that benefits the company and your team, it can really help to make it easier for you to go about that.
Thank you. Awesome. Anybody else wanted to add anything there? Or
yeah, I can go nuts with it. So I Ashley brought up a really great point. If you flip it a little bit and justify the open source work to yourself for a second. What's really cool about the visibility of doing open source work is that you build a public resume. You build, you run into a lot of instances where you see someone's, say their GitHub profile, and you're looking at the pretty green tiles to see, what they've been up to, and you can't see anything because maybe they're working on, strictly private repos, strictly, corporate, internal stuff only. So it's really great about open source is that like you build this like massive public resume that it's really undeniable, right? There are so many cool things that open source folks get to work on. I have this job today because I have this public resume, and it's a job that I couldn't have imagined I would have had otherwise without my contributions to open source. So that's like definitely I think there is I think there is a need to internalize your interest in contributing to open source first and foremost, which helps you become an advocate for it internally. Now, on the internal side, my suggestion, or maybe one of the suggestions would be like scare people. um, I think the software supply chain security conversation that's happening right now, if you look at things like Log4j, fakers, colors, this new type of vulnerability that has emerged, which we're calling protestware, where you've got maintainers that can effectively disable your ability to consume their project, and in some of the worst cases actually actively harm your file system or your set of systems. There's a really strong case for like needing to be active in those spaces to help your company mitigate risk. So that is a decent argument to go in with, and pointing to things like executive orders about software bills of material and supply chain security and the work that OpenSSF is doing in all these various places. I think that's a good place to start. But like it has to, being able to understand what is going into what you're packaging is huge. And the risk that you're accumulating by making some of the decisions that you're making will help you start building that case.
Love it. Thank you. I know Julia's hand was raised. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a couple of things I just want to mention. The first is, if you are trying to convince your company to either start an open source programs office or to release open source, I have found that especially in organizations that aren't as open source aware, it is an easy way in is to talk about marketing and talk about reputation and brand. Because if your company is seen as participating in the open source ecosystem and your marketing department can publicize that, that's reputational points if we're to gamify this. And that's pretty powerful and easy to do if maybe your company isn't quite up to date on the social dynamics of open source. The other thing I want to just mention something, because I do tend to cringe every time somebody says your GitHub profile is your resume. Make sure that you are recognizing contributions from your own employees that don't necessarily show up captured in a digital record anywhere. And there's a lot of that. So just as an addendum. Sorry to contradict you, Stephen.
No, no, not a contradiction at all. And in fact, like I think that we need to do more work both on the open source side and the internal side. I think for for code contributions, it's quote unquote fairly easy to run a script over a set of repos and pull out the committers and build a pretty dashboard. And I think that, like for Kubernetes, we spent some time, as well as like, CNCF, like tag contributor strategy, we spent some time thinking about like, what does it mean? Like, what is a non-code contribution? Right. Because there are so many like really interesting parts of these communities that once you get to a certain size, they do not function without having program managers and technical writers and folks who can handle handle community building. And not every, like open source is not a bunch of engineering work. It's this like lovely ecosystem that cannot be simply derived from just Git commits. Right. So make sure that you're building programs to recognize all of those contributions.
Yay.
Thanks, y'all. Love that. I've been trying to take notes. It's just a lot of information that I'm learning. I just want to know a lot about open source. So this is actually edifying for me. I know Ruth requested to speak, and then Gil. So what's up, Ruth?
Hi everyone. Thank you, Rizel, for the space. I'm learning a lot, and I'm also trying to take notes as well. So my name is Ruth, and I've been doing open source for the past 2 years, actually from the start of my career. And lately, I've been trying to transition into OSPO space. And shout out to ToDo group, because like there are a whole lot of resources there that I have been using, to learn more about the space, and also some courses on Linux Foundation platform. Yeah, so my question, so I have a question actually. So my question is, as regards like finding entry level roles within like in OSPO space. Most of them I see a lot of senior roles or like director level roles, and then you need like experience to get experience, right? So so my question is, why is this the case, and how can this change, like for companies that have OSPOs to put out like entry level roles or to adopt like entry level? So yeah, that's my question.
I'm so excited to hear what others think on this. I totally hear you. I got into OSPO starting out in more of a junior program manager role, and it took a while to build up the knowledge and expertise or general knowledge and expertise in open source and how companies do open source to be able to get to the point where I could lead an open source program office and grow a team there. So there are plenty of companies that hire folks into OSPO that don't have, let's say, more senior experience to lead the program office, that have general knowledge about open source and security and compliance to lead it. But there are plenty of roles that span from DevRel, marketing, program management, different types of programs that can be run inside of an OSPO that can help to build up the experience needed if you want to run your own OSPO. And that's what's really great to me about open source program offices, is that they're not one size fits all. And it's really up to the company and what their goals are to how they establish their OSPO and what roles they need there. So there's many different opportunities to work across different fields inside of an OSPO. And one area that we definitely want to help is to get more people into the pipeline to work in OSPOs. So in the ToDo group, we have a Slack channel. It's publicly available, and it's called mentoring. And it's a space that we hold to have these types of conversations about encouraging the next generation of OSPO workers and PMs and engineers to be able to feel confident to join and work in an OSPO. It is a newer space with respect to many different industries. And so it's an area we're still learning how how to get more people in the pipeline. So feel free to join us there, and maybe we could help grow the mentorship community in OSPOs to close that gap.
I'd also definitely plus one to the mentoring channel in the ToDo group Slack. I'd love to give a little bit of context around why you oftentimes see those senior roles, and Ashley touched on it a bit. And it's because, at least in my experience, it's because most of the more junior level roles are internal transfers from other parts of the company. And this is because at that point, you generally know the makeup of the company, how the different parts interact, and as well as knowing the structure of the technical components, like where code is hosted, how it's hosted, how you ingest open source libraries, etc. And that knowledge is often gained over time. And so when you're trying to get established in an open source programs office, that context is really, really helpful. I transferred from developer relations at Google into their open source programs office as a software engineer before I switched to technical program management. So, and one of the things that I found that made me effective there were the relationships that I had built up around the company up to that point. And half of the job of being in an OSPO is developing those relationships throughout the company so that you can essentially get things done without having any direct authority.
I think that's huge. So as someone who has just done some hiring for my OSPO, because we're kind of walking into it with a fresh new OSPO and a limited amount of recs open, for me it's finding I have a big fuzzy idea of like the things that I work on or the things that need to be worked on, and the best fits for me at the time are the way I described it before I wrote the job rec was if I squint with one eye, they're a program manager, and if I squint with the other, they're an engineer. So what ended up happening is I have folks who are kind of like really, really strong program managers and with engineering and research background, and I have folks who have like been on the product development side, spent a lot of time in engineering and kind of like bootstrapping open source projects and maintaining them over time. So at least for me, knowing that I had only a few recs to work with, I needed to prioritize. I needed to prioritize more senior folks that I could shift. I could shift like larger scale projects over to. Now I realize that a lot of my time is spent in to Julia's point, connecting the dots across various parts of the org. There are people that I've never met before. There are people working on really cool projects that we're not talking about. There is definitely an evangelist. Wow, words. There's definitely a component of like evangelizing just the value of open source across the company, right? And once you have some of those pieces in place, then and you're starting to prove that value, it does get easier to get more recs. It does get easier to to convince people to internally transfer over. And you do get a very, I think the hardest part in the interviewing process was it was really going to come down to the people that paired well together, skill set wise, project overlap. And as your OSPO grows, you kind of know what gaps you're looking to fill, right? But I think we'll tend to see we'll tend to see people hiring for more senior roles in OSPOs, especially if they're budding OSPOs, because that just happens to be what they need at the time. Not that it's it's a forever thing, but I do agree that having that skill set to connect people, the developer relations experience, the engineering background, the program management background are all things that go really well into like a good OSPO shaped candidate.
Thank you for asking that, Ruth. I was actually wondering myself, because I could see myself doing OSPO work in like the far future. So thanks for asking that. Pretty interesting. Before I ask, or before Gil speaks, I hope you don't mind me just quickly asking the panel, what is the ToDo group? Y'all mentioned it a couple times. I want to make sure that people that are listening in know exactly what the ToDo group is and like how it helps you all.
Sure. So ToDo stands for Talk Openly, Develop Openly, and it's a Linux Foundation directed fund that targets connecting folks who are part of organizations that have open source program offices. That said, it's not limited to, it is a community of practice, and it's not limited to just folks who are part of OSPOs. Anyone can join. We do have private channels that are dedicated to some private chatter for various groups, but we have a ton of public channels, and I would encourage you to check out todogroup.org. We have a lot of different ways of joining the community and interacting there, but really it's a great way to be able to get a bunch of folks who have the same problems in the same room and chat.
Thank you for that description. Oh, go ahead, Ashley. Sorry.
No, I was just going to add, Stephen and I are on the steering committee for the ToDo group, and I've been a member for a number of years, and it's been to my benefit working in an OSPO to have this hive mind of people available that work in an OSPO or lead OSPOs across different industries and companies to ask questions around best practices. Hey, what are you doing here? What are you doing about that? So really emphasis on the openness of the group, being able to share with each other because we have shared challenges and pain points, and we're all working at the speed of technology and open source. So as things come up, they're problems for us across all OSPOs. So it's amazing to have this hive mind together to go to talk to. And over the years, the group has published a number of amazing resources. There's guides and case studies, annual surveys, training, and it's all available to anybody to use to establish an open source program office, to encourage your company to establish one. Lots of useful resources out there that everyone can go check out and use. And I've definitely used it throughout my work in OSPOs.
Love it. Thank you so much. Sorry, Stephen, you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can say as for someone who has never done this, like I get like some of the shapes of the things that need to be done for an OSPO, but this is my first time as an OSPO leader, and being able to like be supported by folks who have done this for, some for like multiple decades is like an experience that you cannot beat. Like joining ToDo group is one of the best things that I've done in the last year.
Love it. Thanks, y'all. I'm convinced. I also just pinned the tweet or pinned a link to joining the ToDo group if anyone's interested. And then also, Gil, what did you have to say? Sorry we kept you waiting so long.
No, don't be sorry at all. I had such a fun time listening, and I'm so sorry I joined late. But this is such a great conversation. It's one of my favorite topics. And I'll tell you, I'm happy to see a bunch of familiar faces on this space. I'm even happier to see a whole bunch of not familiar faces, because it just means that there's all these new people that are, or new to me, I should say, that are interested in open source and open source program offices. And I hope they're getting a lot from this. I am. I'll tell you, I just had two thoughts as I was listening to at least the last 20 minutes of conversations. One, that question that Ruth asked was such a fantastic question. I wanted to share a perspective on it because I recently got a similar question asked to me by a university who was looking to put together a curriculum for open source program offices. And they started off asking about, do we teach people how to commit code to GitHub? Do we teach people how to get, how to work, in open source communities? And I said, yes, 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 and they're like, well, is that what you do all day in an OSPO? Do you, contribute code to open source projects? And I said, well, not really. And I said, well, wait a second, I don't get it. Like, what's the open source program office if not a bunch of people who are working on open source projects? And I said, it's such a good question because it's worth us clarifying. I said, think about it this way. Imagine that somebody were to come to you and say, I want to start a business. I want to, I don't know, start a dry cleaning business. Would you be willing to invest, I don't know, $30,000 into my business, and I'll pay you back over the course of a couple of years? And you say, well, I have the money lying around and I believe in you and you'll return on the investment. I will invest in your business. Now, in order for me to do that, I have to know a little bit about, the business and to know a little bit about you and to sort of invest in you and in the business, because that's how I would handle it as an investor. But when you think about like mutual fund managers, they're not necessarily meeting with people who have dry cleaning businesses, right? They're looking at the portfolio of investments. They're looking at, how are we exposed to emerging markets, and how are we exposed, to larger geopolitical forces or to market forces that enable us to maybe address risk or opportunity. So it's that like sort of next level investing that, both are investing, but they're sort of investing at a different level. And I said, if you sort of grok that those are two different ways to invest, similarly, there are different ways that you behave in open source communities. There's actually working on a project where you join the community and you involve yourself in the community that is working on the project that's meaningful to you. But at the programmatic level, you're sort of looking at the portfolio of involvements from your community itself. And by doing that, you're not as connected to any individual project. You're looking at the collection of projects. And that to me clarified so much about, at least, for the person I was speaking to, it really helped them understand how to contextualize the act of working with the community, but then scaling that up for many. So I hope that addresses Ruth's question and maybe other questions that people had. The other thing to share was just a reflection on some of the earlier conversation that Julia and Stephen had about the ways to bring open source program offices to your company. They both touched upon this, and I put this together in something that you'll find on the ToDo group in the GitHub pages. I don't know if it's published on a page yet or not, but it's in GitHub, called the OSPO definition, and it reflects to me three things that companies tend to care about, and succinctly: fear, love, and money. So fear is all those things that companies are afraid about. And Stephen mentioned it. It's like there's all these vulnerabilities in open source projects that you have to get your head on top of, make sure that you have processes for. There's sort of licenses. There's, how do we make sure that we do it right? How do we make sure that we don't do it wrong? And that's this category of fear. And there are people in your company that are worried about it, and you can help assuage their concern. But then there's the love side, and the love side is like, how do we grow better developers, and how do we encourage people to really become, to fulfill themselves and to work with projects that are meaningful to them, to have them enjoy staying here, and to market the company as being a great place for developers. And that really addresses a whole different set of emotions to individuals who want to fulfill themselves. And again, OSPOs can help encourage that. And then the third part is the money, because these are part of businesses, and businesses either want to save money and open source is a tool that can help them do that in many cases, or they want to make money, and OSPOs can help them do that too. And as much as that, we deal with fear and love, we also deal with the financial outcomes that our companies invest in that sustain our projects. So I hope fear, love, and money become a good mnemonic for your open source work. And that's all I had to share.
Thanks so much, Gil. So for the folks who are on the space, Gil is a long-time ToDo group member, veteran in open source. We're also joined by a bunch of other ToDo group members, including Dwayne. I'm trying to scroll down through all of these places.
Rob.
But I see some. Huh?
We also have Rob.
Oh, hey, Rob. And yeah, some folks from other OSPOs or OSPO adjacent, like Jeremy. All right, I won't scroll through everything, but Rich is here too. Hey, Rich.
Thank you for the shout outs and all, because I usually do that in my Twitter spaces, but I'm not that familiar with the open source community. I don't know, the ToDo people or the OSPO community. I don't know what to call y'all. So
Hold up before.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Before we move on, Gil had mentioned how OSPOs can potentially function with universities, and I think it would be good, especially with All-In as a co-host listed on this space, to mention that several of us are involved in the All-In for Students program on the company sponsorship level, which is essentially right now we're in our first cohort. This is we've got graduation coming up soon, actually, the end of the month. And it's, the whole idea behind this program is like, what if you could take you could take someone like at the internship level, even before that, and teach them the tenets of maintaining open source projects, right? So if we can and I shudder to say shift left because it's so popular, but gimmicky. But if we can shift left on the education of open source maintainers, and I think that some of the things that we run into right now, especially with projects of sufficient size, is like keeping your maintainers, kind of curtailing burnout, building that contributor ladder, building people from contributors into maintainers. If we had people learning the tenets of open source and maintainership way ahead of the game while they're in school, then we'd be better for it as a community.
Agreed. And I love the kind of OSPO plus efforts. And I would love to see, especially research institutions, establish their own open source programs office, because university intellectual property, students and their rights, it's all very, very complex to navigate for both students and professors.
Oh, sorry, I did not mean to do a laughing emoji. I was trying to do a heart emoji. Sorry about that. But love that call out. Yes. And anybody else who's listening in, definitely follow All-In open source Twitter account because I'm the one tweeting from it. But also because I really do support the initiative, and I love the idea, like Stephen said, of like introducing students to open source earlier on, and just having them get used to being contributors, doing QA. And I think that's, like he said, one of the best ways to like build up more open source maintainers, maybe even more like project managers and stuff like that in the open source space. We are reaching to the end because it's been a little bit over an hour, but I thought this was a really great conversation. I want to give space for the panelists or anybody to give any last words that they wanted to add, and then we will wrap up.
Do we have to go?
I know. I wish this could be longer.
I just want to thank everyone for joining today, and thank you, Rizel, for inviting me to come and share my thoughts. I guess we had some really good discussion and questions, and I hope we do this again.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rizel and Julia and Stephen and everybody who came on to ask a question. I think we all are very passionate about encouraging more open source use at companies across the board. There's so many organizations that are out there, so many resources, so many foundations, and I hope we can continue talking about how open source can play a central role at companies, creating organizations around it, helping to hire more people, mentorship. Some of that conversation is happening in ToDo Group. It's happening in a lot of other places as well. And let's keep the conversations going.
So I'll say that I think that, one, also, like, thank you everyone. This was like super awesome space. And I'm with some of my favorite people right now. I think that, one of the things that we run into with tech in general is this whole imposter syndrome and fear of being too visible and making mistakes in public. Open source is riddled with that, and it's okay. It's good to fail in public, and it's good to have a community of support to pick you up there. I think in a solid, sustained open source community, you really do get that. So I say all of that to say that all of us are super friendly. Don't feel scared to reach out if you ever have questions, whether it's space, DMs, emails, Slack channels, Matrix, Discord, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, reach out if you have questions.
Please do more of these. These are great. Oh, I'm speaking in my personal capacity, but I wanted to say please do more of these. And these are great. I hope you do more. And I hope if some of you are at FinTech Week in New York City next week to see you, please do more of these.
Thanks, Rob. I definitely will. I definitely will do more of these. And of course, I know Ashley and Julie and Stephen can as well. Thanks, y'all, so much for taking the time to speak and share your experiences in OSPO and answer all the questions that the audience had about like how to start your own OSPO, like how to navigate your career and all that. Really appreciated it. Lots of good resources that I pinned to the top of the Twitter space, but they're also in a Twitter thread if people like want to go back. Quick summary, I guess, is like if you're interested in working or if you're interested in joining like the FOSS Fund working group, contact Dwayne, and then there's also the ToDo group and stuff like that. I won't read through all of it, but thank you so much, y'all. And also thanks to the audience for listening in and, being brave and like requesting to speak. I know that can sometimes be scary, but appreciate everything. Appreciate the time y'all took out, and talk to y'all later. Bye.
Later,
all.
y'all.
Bye, y'all.